The first time this happened was on August 9, 1987, in Venezuela. That day, two remarkable things happened to me. I had several requests for my handicraft business, and Sundays were my regular day to fill the requests or sell some pieces, paint some other pieces, and wash the clothes. My husband had taken the kids to the park to ride their bikes and then to my mother-in-law's house, so he'd be late getting home. I walked to the kitchen area after working all day, and to my astonishment, my spouse had left the tools on the kitchen counter. This enraged me, and I exclaimed out, "Damn it! This would be the day that my husband would not leave things in their proper places." I began to pick them up when I heard a voice say to me, "That's it. Everything in its place." When I opened the kitchen door, I noticed a man standing there, smiling and wearing a white tunic with a golden strap around his waist. He had wavy hair that reached almost to his shoulders. It did not frighten me in the least. He later vanished. I took the tools, put them in the box, and placed them in the designated closet, which was directly beneath the stairwell and in front of the kitchen. I realized I was alone at home after I put the tools in place and shut the door. Oh my goodness. Suppose they left the door open and someone got in. I dashed to the kitchen and grabbed a knife to defend myself in case I was attacked. I ran to the main door and locked it, then to the garage door and closed it, then to the patio door and locked it, and then I began to search all of the lower floors rooms, closets, and restrooms. Then I walked upstairs to the bedrooms and did the same thing. I even went to the terrace area that leads to the patio and closed all the windows and access doors after checking the chests of the drawers. Only my bedroom remained. Once there, I began to have unexplainable anxiety. I suddenly remembered that the figure standing at the door was leaning on one foot, and I realized that I couldn't see any feet. I got chills just thinking about how I was running through the home. This being was hovering still, and I understood he was Jesus of Nazareth. He was exactly how they described him to us, without the wounds and thorny crown. This made me feel better. Better I just remain over here and be done, I told myself as I entered the room. I took the remote, turned on the television, began watching the shows, and selected a movie. I didn't want to take a shower for fear of someone being in the house, so I put it off till my husband returned. I'd been watching TV for almost an hour and a half when I realized my spouse had arrived. Good. They've arrived, I comforted myself, continuing to lie down. At that moment, I noticed a large, magnificent light approaching my bedroom window. "We're coming, searching for you," says a womanly voice with a dictatorial tone. My husband was taking the kids to their various rooms at the time, and then he came into our room. I was out of my body and trying to return to it just as he came to the bedroom door, but I couldn't. The bright ball was almost entering my room through the window, and I couldn't feel my body, which was heavy and immobile. I was watching myself. I dashed toward my spouse. That didn't open the door, and I was already beside him in the corridor. He didn't notice me. I was speaking to him, but he was not paying attention. I ran once again to find my body. It was right there, and I couldn't move. I was frozen like a popsicle, yet I was really hot inside. My spouse then answered the door. The light was still shining. I tried to talk to him, but he was unhelpful. He knelt down and began to study me. He then stood up and went into the kitchen. I stayed, trying to move my body but failing. I abandoned my body once more and dashed to the lower floor kitchen since my husband was there. And surprise, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't go down the stairwell. Nothing. I dashed back to my bedroom, where the light was still there, but closer to the window and almost in, and it was even more lovely. Then I sensed that the maid had come, accompanied by her sleeping daughter. I called her, but she didn't answer. She walked over to my side and didn't notice me. I dashed to my daughter's room, began to caress her, and said some words to her, but she didn't hear me. I stroked her hair and kissed her, and she moved, but she didn't wake up. I rushed again to attempt to get to the kitchen, but I couldn't get down. I dashed to my son's room, but he didn't hear me. The strange thing was that I never unlocked the doors. I had no idea how I got in. Then I raced to the maid's room, and nothing happened. She didn't hear me, so I spanked her and said, "Miss XX, it looks like they want to kidnap me. Assist me." And nothing happened. I exited her room and went back to the kitchen, but nothing happened. I was unable to get down. I then went, looked at my body, and tried to get into it, but nothing happened. I was aware, yet unable to move. I was completely paralyzed. I got back out, went to the top of the stairs, crouched down, and saw through the wall. From that point on the stairs, you could only see the kitchen door. I noticed my spouse eating crackers with cheese and ham and drinking a full glass of cold milk. I yelled at him to stop eating, come over and aid me. Nothing happened. He didn't hear what I was saying. I decided to return to my body after realizing that no one could help me except myself. I got into my body. The heat was intense, and I felt too heavy at the same moment. Because of how heavy it was, I had the impression that the bed was sinking and would tumble to the lower floor. Then the light went out, and my spouse entered the room. He approaches the bed and begins to observe me, and I request him to assist me, but he does not hear me. Then he kneels down and begins to observe me once more. I was pounding him once more. He didn't see me, hear me, or feel my blows. He just moved his head. I began to pray the Lord's Prayer and found myself reciting it loudly and precisely where it reads, "Our daily bread." I returned to regular life, still cold, when I felt a hard hit and a strong sound, something like trek, 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 coming from my heart. And I opened my eyes and said to my husband, "Well, my guy, you're insane." They were attempting to take me away through the window, and instead of assisting me, you were simply eating and did not assist me. And then I told him, "I'm really hot. Go with me to the restroom. I do not want to be alone." When he touched me, he noticed that I had sweated a lot and was quite cold, and he said, "Drink this water." He'd brought a glass of water with him. I was still in bed, feeling heavy. I drank it, then poured it over my head before heading to the shower. I didn't want to sleep because I was afraid they'd take me. I sat there the entire night. I've had multiple experiences, but they stand out as the most powerful. Second experience, on November 12, 2011, at 9 p.m., I was in Miami, Florida, composing and reading emails. At 3:10 p.m., I stood up and said to my husband, "Good night, I'm going to sleep." To which he replied, "Why at this time? It's still early in the morning. I'm used to getting to bed about 12 a.m. or later." "No, good night, I'm bored," she said as she entered her bedroom. I slept in the exact position I was accustomed to, face up. I'm not sure how long I'd been sleeping when I woke up in the middle of the Third World War. The armaments I was seeing were entirely unusual, and unusual in comparison to conventional arms, and the devastation was horrific. Corpses everywhere, roads ruined, buildings, children and animals, as well as destroyed trees, and the water was tainted. The world was in shambles, and I died. Then I returned to my body and said to myself, I need to go back and see more. I exited my body once more and saw many wounded, grief, and disaster. Suddenly, I found myself on my body, feeling as if all my molars in my lower jaw had been extracted and in excruciating pain. Then I felt as though ropes were pulling my neck towards my shoulders, causing severe discomfort in both shoulders. At the same time, I felt like I was being belted from the shoulders to the beginning of the nipples. I was completely still and immobile. Then I realized my spouse had gone to bed. I tried to move, but couldn't. I departed my body once more. I flew and flew at breakneck speed until I found myself in front of God. I told him I still had things to do. And then boom, in thousandths of a second, I returned to my body. I was no longer in anguish, but I was filled with calm and nothing. I'm unable to move. I returned to God, or pure energy, and told him that I was alive, but couldn't move. And bang! I returned instantly and felt the belt pressing me tighter. But I was not in agony, and I began to feel them inserting a chip, roughly the size of a foot, into my right forearm, through my chest, and out of my left forearm. The chip was constructed of a transparent substance with several little transparent spots. I felt as if electricity was being transmitted to my body as they were inserting the chip into my forearm. It felt like, though, when seismographs detect and record an earthquake, the lines on a legal-sized white sheet of paper going about me were very close together, and I was experiencing the noise of a large turbine, something like foo, 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 or hoo, hoo, an energy noise. I couldn't feel any discomfort, but I could move my right hand's little finger. I remained stiff and cold. My husband leaped out of the bed as soon as I touched him, thinking it was a lizard that had snuck into the bed. When he switched on the light, I clenched my teeth and said, "Call the ambulance. Call the ambulance." He overheard me and dialed 911. I dragged myself out of bed in every manner I could. I walked into the living room like a robot. I told him, clenching my teeth once again, that I was not in agony, but that my entire body was stiff. I told him to tell them you're having a heart attack, and he did. When the ambulance arrived, I felt more at ease, but I still didn't feel like myself. They inquired, "Who?" And I gritted my teeth and I said, "I." They asked whether I was in pain, and I responded no, but I was still rigid inside and incredibly cold, even though I wasn't cold. They took my vital signs, and to everyone's surprise, everything was fine. They then inquired as to how I was feeling. "Yes," I said, but I wasn't entirely myself. When they asked if I could walk to the ambulance, I said yes. I figured if I said no, they'd take longer, and I couldn't let the minutes pass because there were 2 cars to move and make room for the ambulance, and then I'd have to wait for them to bring down the gurney. I went down the 3 steps as quickly as I could and took 6 steps towards the ambulance. When I arrived, they told me to lie down, which I did with caution. I was still tense. One paramedic began to pinch or inject my right hand, while another paramedic placed the clamp to assess my oxygenation. Then I turned to the paramedic and told her that the pinch on my right hand was getting worse, since she couldn't find the vein. I always donate blood, and they don't get my vein quickly the first time. 6 times she had pinched me. The guy on the left asked whether I was allergic to aspirin. I said no. The guy on the right said they were giving me 3 children's aspirins. "Take them with this." And he handed me a small glass. So I took them, and they asked whether I was on any medications. I mentioned that I no longer have a thyroid, and that it had been eliminated with a radiation tablet. Then I felt something trying to come out of me, so I vomited something dark, or a deep red hue. It looked like a gelatinous lump on top of a liver. I threw up to the paramedics left. My spirit sat down and exited the ambulance, beginning to fly and fly and fly. "Take away the pantyhose. Take away the pantyhose," one said to the other. I tried to hold on to it, but then I was within this enormous dome, a light salmon color, and I saw a lovely city far away and turned around to see my body on the stretcher inside the ambulance, another ambulance behind this one, and my husband driving my car farther back. I didn't care. All I wanted was to continue my flight to the lovely city. Then I heard several people chanting my name, but all I wanted to do was continue my journey to the lovely city. I found myself inside the hospital, with numerous tubes in my face, and began listening to voices, continuing my journey to the lovely city. When I turned back, I saw my spouse chatting to a man in a suit and a white shirt, inside an office far away from where my body was, and I continued floating. I began to hear the sound of silverware, but they were surgical implements. I continued flying while hearing them inside my sternum and telling my spouse, "Tell him I don't have a thyroid and that I take artificial hormones." The man asked him if he knew what kind of medicine I was taking, and he said he didn't. I urged him to tell him X and the milligrams. He didn't hear what I was saying. I said it louder so the man might hear me, but nothing happened. I attempted to take my husband's hands in mine. "You can answer that." "I take X," I cried as my husband passed through this. I kept flying until he replied with the name of the drug, which the man scribbled down. A gigantic, pale salmon-colored coral block appears in front of me during my journey to the gorgeous city. I flew around it to go around it, and my journey continues. As I got closer to the city, another brick fell crosswise, and the block was impeding my arrival. It was done 5 times, and each time, the block grew considerably larger, and the city became more beautiful and closer. Just as I was about to enter the enormous metropolis, a loud voice emerged from nowhere, like when a giant thunderclap falls and booms loudly. My name is said in a very authoritative manner and very loudly. I began to feel a tremendous force pulling me back, like a large turbine. I could see the moon, and a large transparent entity, like a jellyfish, was holding the moon above his head and the planet Earth in between his feet. I don't see the same folks who used to be around me. Instead, they were transporting my corpse to another room. I noticed my spouse outside, sitting down with tears in his eyes. He was a little further away from where they were transporting my body. They put me on a bed there, and I didn't have any tubes in my throat. "What is going on?" I asked, as I opened my eyes. I was so calm, with such inner peace and comfort. There was a nurse there, and she told I couldn't get up. When she called, a doctor arrived. He was one of the doctors I saw while my body was being carried to the gurney by around 25 people. "Madam, how are you feeling?" he said. "Are you in pain?" "Not at all," I said, quietly. Then he told me I couldn't move because they had implanted a mesh or stent in my heart, and that I couldn't stand since my femoral artery was blocked. "Yes, I've seen it," I replied. In the intensive care unit, they gave me saline solution until the next day, when they made me stand. On the 15th, at 3 p.m., I was already home, going about my daily routine, with no chest pain and only pelvic pain. I was back to work and taking medication 2 weeks later. After a year, I began to notice a small ache in my sternum. I want to underline that I turned around multiple times throughout my trip to the lovely city and saw my body nearby, but I had no desire to leave my body and continue my trip to the beautiful city. I was experiencing a lot of happiness inside myself while flying, and I was also feeling the wind of cool air and the strength of the air. I felt it based on the pace. My speed could be increased or decreased.